Welcome to 6th grade history. This is lesson 138. Our pages are 265 to 267, and with a chapter or a comprehension check on page 267. There's also homework CCU 14, B numbers 6 and 7, and C numbers 8 through 10. If you'll do those all on paper, they can all be the CC and the CCU. They can all be on the same paper. Just label them and make sure you do that. I'm going to ask a couple questions from what we've talked about before. Then I'm going to let you pause it to take your quiz, and then we'll get into the rest of it. Okay, give the date when terrorists launched the deadliest attack on American soil since Pearl Harbor. September 11th, 2001. Could have also said 9/11, but September 11th, 2001 is that full date. Who was responsible for the terrorist attacks on September 11th, 2001? The name of the organization is Al-Qaeda, and its leader Osama bin Laden. What radical Islamic group was one of the first targets in the war on terror? It was the Taliban, and they were in Afghanistan. What was the name of the Iraqi dictator that was defeated during Operation Iraqi Freedom? His name is Saddam Hussein. Who did President Bush defeat in the 2004 election? Senator John Kerry. And name the costliest storm in U.S. history. It was Hurricane Katrina. Okay? All right. Go ahead and take your quiz. You can pause the video, take your quiz if your parents have it ready. If they do not have it ready, then you can take it at the end. But I'll give you just a moment to pause it. All right. We are looking at some other things that happened. So in 2003, so a little before the election and those storms that hit, we actually had a tragedy happen with NASA. On February 1st, 2003, there was a space shuttle that was coming back into our atmosphere. They had 7 passengers, and they had been successful in going up and doing some projects, some experiments, and they had just completed the 113th shuttle mission since the program began in 1981. The Columbia was this shuttle, and something had happened in takeoff that they didn't realize had happened. A piece of foam had hit the wing of the shuttle during the takeoff and had punctured it. And so these were the heat-resistant tiles that helped protect it from the extreme heat of re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. And so without knowing that, they weren't able to try to fix the problem. And so they didn't realize that that was an issue. And so when they came back into the Earth's atmosphere, the entire shuttle exploded, killing all 7 members. And so that was a tragedy that shook our nation again, in the midst of everything else we had been going through. And that was pretty devastating. Something else that has been occurring in our recent history and in this time when we've got and I'm sure it was occurring before this, but that we noticed that many people were coming to the United States for the freedom that we have here. And while many were coming through legal channels, they were getting the right documents, and they were making sure that they were here on a legal capacity, there were more, just as many, if not more, that were coming illegally. They were entering through borders that we didn't have secure. And there was many from the Islamic terrorist group that had come in through the southwestern border. So that's where Mexico is, and there's many places along that they could enter the United States and be and then just come in and not be here legally. And so unfortunately, there wasn't, the policies that were in place were weak and ineffective, and they weren't stopping people from coming in. And so then we had some international things. We have the axis of evil, that was what President Bush called them. They were 3 countries that make up the axis of evil. They were ones that were acquiring these weapons of mass destruction, these nuclear weapons and other weapons that could attack another country. And that's Iran, Iraq, and North Korea. Now, North Korea is the most, one of the world's most brutally oppressive communist countries. They do not just oppress their own, they oppress others, other countries around them. And they tried to have President Bush and encouraged the nations around them to work it out with diplomacy. That's where you have a conversation and you try to resolve the issues without fighting. And he had encouraged those countries to do that instead of having the U.S. threaten North Korea, because that's not always going to be effective. And in this case, North Korea was pretending to agree, while at the same time still building up their missiles and testing missiles and all of this. Iran was the main sponsor of Islamic terrorism, and they clearly wanted nuclear weapons to attack others. So that was their goal. And they had said that they would wipe out Israel. They want to just completely destroy them off the map. And President Bush was adamant that they were not going to be able to do that. Not while the U.S. was siding with Israel. And they didn't. He said that they wouldn't allow Iran to possess a nuclear weapon. And they tried to claim that they needed it for the energy efficiency, as that's actually, you can use a nuclear power plant to power things, and it is good on efficiency, but they were not just using it for that. They were using it for those as weapons. And so we come to the election of 2008, and of course, President Bush has served his 2 terms. He can't serve another term in a row. He would have to take a break, and if it came to that, if he could get reelected after that, then he is eligible to go in a future election. But 2008 presidential candidates were Senator John McCain and Barack Obama. And you guys probably know who became our president. It was Barack Obama. We were looking for a change in America because of the housing market had gone down. The gas prices were really high. It was extremely high for gas prices. It was really difficult financially, and we were looking for something different in the politics. And sometimes when we're looking for something different, that's when we elect someone into office and it's either really good or it's really bad. And that's been the typical norm for America. John McCain was a former POW. He was a prisoner of war in the Vietnam War, and he promised change. But at the same time, on the flip side, the Democratic Party also ran a slogan of hope and change. And I think part of the reason that people voted for Barack Obama was because he was a trailblazer. He was the first Black American to win the nomination of a major political party. And he was, if we elected him as president, he would be the very first Black president that we've ever had. And I think partly there were lots of people that wanted that because of his, just because it would be that would identify us as being as showing that we were that all men are equal, and that's not a bad thing. Obviously that's scriptural, but we also want a candidate, we want a president who looks to God. If we can have one that looks to God and is really wanting to serve God and not just appease the people, that's better, I think. But he did win the election. It was 53% to 46%, so that's a pretty decent, clear, to show the clear winner. He became our 44th president and the first Black president in our nation's history. And as we face the future, and this just kind of applies to all of future, and right now this definitely applies to us, we need to remember to pray for our government. We need to remember to pray for those around us, praying that our freedoms are protected, and to keep our nation the land of the free, and that those that are in leadership have the wisdom to make those decisions that they need to. And I'm just going to end with some verses from 1 Timothy 2, the verses that are listed in that paragraph. I exhort, therefore, or I urge you, that first of all, supplications, prayers, intercessions, and giving of thanks be made for all men, for kings, and for all that are in authority, that we may lead a quiet and peaceable life in all godliness and honesty. And that's just, Paul is telling Timothy that we need to pray for those that are in authority over us. So that is, first of all, as kids, that's your parents. You pray for your parents, that they would have the wisdom that they need as they raise you, and as they raise your siblings, and as they guide and lead your family, hopefully in the things of God. We also pray for, you can also pray for your teachers. You can pray for our Wyoming government, the governor, the representatives, the senators. You can pray for the nation. And so that's something that is something that we need to put into practice. That prayer for them, giving of thanks, thanking God for them, because ultimately the Bible says that God's the one who puts up kings and those in authority and takes them down. He's the one that has them in there for a purpose. And so, especially during this time, pray for those that are in authority. They have a lot of hard decisions to make, and they are under a lot of pressure, but we can pray for them and pray that God would get the glory from everything that's happening. So I'm going to that's the end of lesson 138, and we will see you next time.